Well, before we get started, though, I heard some of Lou's talk, and I think it was right on. It was really fabulous. Thank you. But you said
But I knew there was a but coming.
you made Bitcoin feel like a static thing, and it was like people said, oh, it's too slow, it's too whatever, and then all of a sudden there's the Lightning Network. And so there are there are more engineers working on Bitcoin than any of the other coins by a factor of 2. So there will continually be, when there's a need, there will be engineers that are working on that need. And so I believe it will continue to be the leading currency moving forward, because they'll just, if something cool comes along, they'll just incorporate it into Bitcoin.
All right,
Right.
hold on that thought. Hold on.
No, let him respond.
Because no, this is a really interesting thing, and I totally agree that what you're saying could be the way that the world goes. I totally appreciate that's an outcome, but it just seems to me, again, like I think of Bitcoin like as this bridge, like going from helping people get from A to B, and it's kind of fundamentally broken. And so what you're saying is, I don't know, let's build this other bridge on top of this bridge. It'll go like that, and new things will, and I think just something brand new bridge with all the latest technology that lets people just bridge here and not all the way around. And again, it's a very macro view, but it just seems to me that a new bridge has to be better than this old bridge that's non-functional from a governance perspective.
All right, so hold on.
You know, I saw Dave Marquardt in the audience,
we're gonna lose.
and he was on Microsoft's board,
Yeah.
and they were the operating system, right? They were the same thing as what we've got here in Bitcoin, and somebody came up with WordPerfect, and it was a great thing, and then they brought it in and they made Word, and then somebody had Lotus 1, 2, 3, and they brought it in, they made Excel, and Microsoft just continued to grow and become that dominant force in enterprise. So Dave, well done.
Right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
So let me
same
stop,
thing's
let me
going to
stop.
happen in
We're
Bitcoin.
going to put a little perspective on this
Hey.
before we get carried away. The title of the panel is Insight into Blockchain. We have, I think, 3 of the greatest experts here. Tim needs no introduction, truly. Great,
But go ahead.
A great venture capitalist, now saying a third of your activity, third of the companies you're looking at are related to crypto.
It's probably half now.
Half. And then many of you, I think, saw Lou's presentation, which was excellent. And Lou is the #1 blogger, one of the #1 bloggers. Several people claim to be #1, but you're one of the #1s. And did an excellent overview, I thought, of his 7 key issues. And Paul is head of E&Y's crypto consulting group. He's an early believer, left IBM to create this practice, working with many of the world's largest corporations. And I think one thing that everyone in this room can accept is that now we're almost 10 years after Satoshi's paper. And at this point, virtually every large corporation, virtually every government, most regulators, thousands of developers, millions of individuals are participating in this ecosystem. So there's something important, but I think the purpose of this panel is to say what. And what many of you are investors or participants, some of you are entrepreneurs. What do you do about that? How should you think about it? So that's what I'd like to try and accomplish in 15 minutes, what we're going to try and do. So we're going to try and break this down to 3 different ideas. So the first idea is, what about the companies that are trying to make money out of the ecosystems? These are wallets, exchanges, lots of initial applications, miners. How is that working? So we're going to talk about that for a second, because some of those are making a lot of money right now. Second thing is, what about enterprises? What companies are using this fundamental technology? And remember, there's 1,500 different crypto schemes or more at this point. So, but many companies are saying, how could we use this to replace basically our database processes and design that we have in today? So that's tons of infrastructure that can be replaced. How's that going? What's working? What works in a decentralized application? And what actually works better in a centralized application? And last is this whole much more complex ecosystem, which includes, and I completely agree with Tim, that blockchain has where all the developers are around Bitcoin, but it doesn't work well. There's certain things which do not work well, and I think everyone who's involved in this would agree with that. So what
You keep saying we're going to agree with everything.
No, you're not going to. No, you're not going to. You're going to
just said, and I think we'll all agree with that.
Well, we'll.
You said
not
that
you.
twice.
Okay, most of us.
You think all of them are agreeing with you?
No, they're not. They're nodding though. Okay. So then we're going to talk about what this means for these DApps and ICOs. How should you look at that? What is that? How's that ecosystem evolving? Is there any way any of you can really play in that, or do you have to be someone like Tim or Lou or someone who spends all their time doing nothing but that in order to make intelligent choices? So those are the three things I hope we can accomplish. And I think we're going to start, Lou, you're going to talk about some of the ecosystem companies for a couple minutes. You want to talk about that?
In terms of what part of the ecosystem?
Yeah, about in the actual ecosystem, do you have any observations? If you don't, we can ask others.
Sure. Well, look, I mean, obviously at the start, what you have today is the exchanges are where kind of the most money being made today, because most of the transactions that are going on are related just to the trading of the coins back and forth. So the people who are facilitating that and charging at this point, pretty excessive fees for doing that are making very, very significant amounts of money.
Mm-hmm. So would you invest in any new ecosystem type, like companies like that, or do you think that Coinbase and some of the other largest companies are the ones who are making all the money, and it's too late?
Well, I just say, I think one of the things that I mentioned before is companies that have existing customers that they can now, because this isn't, I don't think different, it's just a new thing, and if they're selling A, can they sell B? And, actually I was just last night, had a meetup, and the speaker was head of crypto for IndieGoGo. And I think they can be a really interesting platform, right? Because they already have, a very large audience that's, invested in stuff through them, and why not just layer on top of ICOs? Mm-hmm. So I think you're still going to see new, very significant players come in.
So, and how many of you?
It is interesting that IndieGoGo, because I think of crypto as like the IndieGoGo or Kickstarter for societal transformations. Where a company is just like for the good of shareholders, and a nonprofit's for the good of society. Well, this is for what you want society to look like. And when you buy a coin, you're buying a coin for that to happen. And it's a little bit like an IndieGoGo campaign.
I can't hold my tongue any longer.
About time you woke up.
I've been in the space for a while. I wouldn't put a penny into a utility coin ICO. I think these are fundamentally flawed. You're not investing in society. Like, you're just giving money to a for-profit company, right? It should tell you everything you need to know about ICOs to know that in many cases, they have to record that money on their books as a non-refundable donation. That's not an investment. It's a non-refundable, you have made a non-refundable donation to a for-profit company, right? Just ask yourself, how would you explain that to your spouse? Okay? And the best analogy I can give you is it was as if the Wright brothers were going to sell frequent flyer miles to fund the development of the airplane, right? Now, keep in mind, you don't have a share. You do not have a share in the Wright brothers company. There is no guarantee that there will ever be an airplane, right? And all of these ICOs, they are the second place winners in a business school business plan competition. They kind of seem like good ideas, which no one can execute. So right?
And there are two.
You got half an hour. There are two, I think, fundamental problems at the heart of ICOs that people should be aware of. Number one, nobody really wants to settle their business transactions in a synthetic foreign currency, right? I had a conversation with the CFO of a power company. I said, let me understand this. Your revenues are in dollars, and your expenses are in dollars, and somebody wants you to settle your intermediate liabilities in imaginary crypto coins? No. That is stupid, risky, and unnecessary.
Wait, they say that's the same thing about the dollar.
No, but...
Oh, it's got the full faith and credit of the U.S. government.
Right. So, but the difference is we pay our
Venezuelan government.
We pay our taxes in dollars. We earn revenue in dollars. Right. So if your business model is in dollars, then your intermediate liability should be in dollars.
Okay, you're living in the past.
No,
I'm totally
living in the past
because the future. I look and I think, dollars and all those other currencies are falling away. And people say, isn't Bitcoin volatile?
No.
I think Bitcoin is stable.
Let me just finish my other issue. So item number one It's risky to settle your transactions in a foreign currency that's intermediate, right? If we all transacted in Bitcoin, fine, but we don't. We transact in dollars, and somebody wants you to like settle your intermediate liabilities in Swiss francs. That's crazy.
We used to transact in dollars.
You used to. I still pay my taxes in dollars. I buy coffee in dollars. Secondly,
yeah, the government hasn't caught up yet.
Secondly, and very importantly, there is a fundamental conflict of interest between the token holders and the shareholders of this company, right? Imagine you are the shareholder.
The innovation leader for blockchain?
I am, and this is
Who is
this is the pain. This is the pain.
Look
this
at
is
this
the pain
title.
for 5 years.
And by the way, people are buying these as coins. They know that they're coins. They're not investing. They know they're buying
think that's
coins.
not true. They believe they're
Wait,
under
you think everybody's an idiot?
Yes.
Well, hold on a minute.
All right, now hold on. That's it.
Everyone I've ever met was brilliant by comparison, right? But they're buying currency, and what they're hoping is that it will build a network.
It
that
won't.
it will.
But hold on
What
a
do you
minute.
mean it won't? Bitcoin did.
Whoa.
So
just
did
hold
Ether.
on a minute.
So
Just so
did
you guys
Bitcoin
are you
Cash.
guys? Do you believe that people should not be allowed to invest in ICOs? That they're too stupid?
I think
Would
they
you
should
pass
be
laws that
restricted.
no more ICOs?
I think
that
they
you
should be
God
restricted
and tell
to
people.
I think they should be restricted to qualified investors
Because everybody else is too stupid. Let them buy a lottery ticket. That's good. Go do that with your money.
I don't think they should be allowed to buy lottery tickets either. Right?
Okay, but in a world in which they do, are they better off? Which one are they better
Are you
off?
going to tell us all how we have to live? Is that the idea here? You're going to tell us all, this is what you must do.
Well, let's say
No, don't cross your legs.
I got
No,
my brain.
don't.
This brain. I have a
Close your computer. Listen.
Obviously.
I think so. So we looked at 400 ICOs last year. 60% of those have already closed up shop. Right? That's a level of risk that's extraordinary. Right?
What do you think the internet was? You think everybody succeeded in the internet?
So
or is
here's
it
the
higher or
question
lower?
here's the question I would pose, which is
Yeah.
what percentage of companies that you do a seed round in bring a product to market? Not are successful, but just bring a product to market.
Oh, I
high.
don't think they all get
No,
there.
but it's more than 50%, right?
Yeah, probably more than
We're already on track to see that more than 50% of initial coin offerings from last year will never bring even a product to market. This is extraordinarily risky investing, and I think it's not untruthful to say that most investors do not understand, especially retail investors, do not understand the risks. They are not able to match the statements in the SAFT or the prospectus with the software code.
All right, so hold on one second. So we got a couple different ideas here. One is, what do we think about the ICO process? I'll come back to that in 1 second, because I think, because I want to break down one key question we're addressing here, which is, Tim is arguing that Bitcoin is a currency, has the function of currency, and I'd like to ask, do other people agree with that? Because if you say, what's the definition of a currency?
Okay, before you do, let me say why I think it's a currency.
Yep.
I just got a spam. The spam said 1,000 Bitcoin for this beautiful mansion, and then it said 100 Bitcoin for this beautiful yacht, and 10 Bitcoin for this beautiful car. And I looked, and I thought, and then I was pushing, and I was thinking, well, you know, what's the translation? No, they are not accepting anything but Bitcoin. And then I got this flyer in the mail, and it's KFC. They have the Super Bitcoin bucket, and the Super Bitcoin bucket can only be bought with Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. So this is the beginning. People are starting to move this way. All the smartest and most driven engineers in the world are focused on cryptocurrency. They are not focused on fiat currency. There have not been a lot of innovations in fiat currency for the last 20 years. However, there have been a lot of innovations in cryptocurrency, and so Bitcoin, I believe, will be the best currency once they solve the speed, once they solve the whatever else.
But actually, but let's talk back to it. But if you say, and we looked at a lot of early crypto,
and the speed has been solved,
and payments, and I do a lot of work in payments and have for most of my career. And you'd say, okay, well, how is it working as a payments mechanism? That was the early premise, and the answer is it doesn't work well. And I'd say all those initial companies have pretty much failed. So it has.
But that's what the Lightning Network
Well,
was for.
that's true. So, but I think that it doesn't. If you'd say, what do you want in a currency? Stability of value is actually an important variable, because otherwise hedging costs and your costs and
Okay, but stable against what? Because I look at Bitcoin and I think this is the future currency, and there's this volatility, right? No, the volatility is all the other currencies as they disappear from our use.
Yeah, but you know, it's pretty much irrelevant. It really doesn't matter. You could think Bitcoin's going to $100 million. It's still not good as a payment mechanism.
Right.
So that's a key distinction. You could hold on to it and say it's appreciating, and you might argue that it's like Gresham's law, that it's driving, like, are people hoarding it and using other currency?
When you say there's a need for using it as a payment mechanism, then entrepreneurs, will come up with solving that need. I've seen, 30 entrepreneurs that are doing a card of some sort that can make it so that you
So
can
let's
pay
ask this room. How many people have
in
used Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency as a means of payment, to pay for anything? Okay.
It's coming, baby.
All right.
See,
Look at that.
I think my view is Bitcoin is a legitimate currency, but the future really on public blockchains for most enterprises is they will transact in tokenized fiat currency.
Okay.
Right? So my dollar tokens for your asset or product tokens, but I think the biggest volume will ultimately be fiat currencies tokenized on public blockchains.
Okay, so now let's zero in on
that destroys the whole purpose. That makes no sense. We've got a currency that is distributed and global, and you're telling me, no, we'll tie the currency to this fiat crap that's stuck with some political force that swings it back and forth. And if you live in Venezuela, they'd be screaming at you right now, because they're going, wait, I've lived 30 years and my family fortune has disappeared 3 times because the government has swung.
But I don't live in Venezuela. Now, you could make a
And
reasonable
actually,
argument.
I'll tell you something. People in Venezuela would rather have dollars
we
than
will
Bitcoin.
soon be like
Argentina.
Venezuela.
And
there
actually,
are
people in Venezuela,
thousands of different, not thousands, there are probably tens of countries where people are going, anything but this. Anything
But this isn't one of them. And the U.S., Europe, Japan.
It's a big
they're
world.
well
You're
run.
stuck in this one.
And
I actually think the geographic borders are falling, and people are easily moved from one place to another. And if one country decides that Bitcoin's illegal, like China, then another country pops up, like Japan, and says Bitcoin's our national currency. And people will move. All these great entrepreneurs I know moved from China to Japan. As soon as that happened, boom.
Yeah, all right, so here's the thing. I think we've got a clearly strong ideological divide on this question of Bitcoin. We're gonna move to a separate question, which is distributed applications. And I think a critical question is, in the last couple of years, we found out that some of these things work well as distributed applications and other things don't. A centralized application actually works better. And so getting to one of the key questions came at the last panel, how do you evaluate that? Do you have rules that can help us evaluate the distinction today, or do you have to,
we have kind of a 5-point test, because at EY, lots of people say, hey, that's a really cool thing, can we put a blockchain on it, right? And the answer is, well, maybe, right? So we have a 5-point test. Is a blockchain good for you? Ask your doctor, right? Question number 1, are you trying to get multiple parties to work together on something, right? Question number 2, do they have trust issues, right? Payments, are we engaging in transactions where I don't always agree with how you calculated something, for example, whether it's a purchase order or a royalty calculation. Number 3, is it important to have a tamper-proof record of the transactions between the parties, right? Number 4, are we moving something of finite value around, right? Blockchains do a great job of preventing you from double counting and copying, so that makes a lot of sense. Like, are you doing that? And number 5, do the group of participants in the network as a whole benefit from some level of increased transparency across the network? And what we would say is, if you can answer yes to at least 3 of those questions or more, a blockchain might be a very good solution for your problem.
Okay, now
so I look at it as just one thing. It's trust. Do you trust a central source to control this data? Do you have that one source? And like banks were our trusted third party for many, many years. And now we now have a distributed source that is, unhackable and and trustworthy and unhackable so far.
Right.
And so we don't actually need the banks. Sorry for the bankers who are in here, but now we no longer are going to need banks because we have a trusted third party that can manage money, move it around. And you talked about the technology. Yeah, this technology now is going to move right through some of the biggest industries in the world because it can do a better job, more effective, more honest, more straightforward, more fair job than any centralized system.
Okay. Now, Lou, what criteria would you apply to saying when a decentralized app is better than a centralized app?
Sure. Well, I'd actually just like to ask Paul, because I thought he was very thoughtful, just about how you think of, because I don't consider myself, necessarily a maximalist, but I don't personally think private blockchains. I think that's an oxymoron.
I do too. We have 4 bets on the future of blockchain in the enterprise. Number 1, public blockchains. We'll shift from private to public. Private blockchains don't scale, right? Number 2, the shift from cryptocurrency to fiat currency. We think companies will want to transact on fiat currencies. Number 3, the shift from notarization to tokenization. So notarizing, like I did this at this time, that's kind of useful, but it's a dead end. Tokens, however, I can buy and sell and trade. So my asset tokens, my inventory tokens for your dollar tokens, we can now have what we call a full cycle economic transaction on a public blockchain. And then lastly, we will move from this model of being outside of regulation to being fully compliant and regulated. So you and I will be able to transact on public blockchains provided that I have and you have both a KYC token in our wallets and that we're copying our auditors or some other regulator node in the process. So, but I think we want large companies and investment houses and other places to be in on this process. You want to invest in a crypto asset fund. It's going to be regulated and audited, and that's kind of where the future is going.
Lou, what do you think about that?
I think that's very enlightening.
Yeah, I do too. I'd add 2 more things to this, which is a big criteria is in the financial industry. What is the financial industry? It's basically a collection of ledgers. So the bank is ledgers, subledgers, the Fed system, Fed wire system is a ledger. So that's what the financial system is. So if you have one ledger, you don't have to have multiple ledgers that are reconciled. So there's a huge amount of expense in that. Now, obviously, here's a good example. But I want to throw an example.
Yeah, let me just add, but I do think, and I know Tim talked about this some, but that you're not just solving for the functionality of the dollar. You're also solving for the fact that you know how much of it is being printed, right? You don't know how much dollars being printed. So you want to hold something, you have no idea how much they're printing. You have no idea. You'll just hold on to it. They can print quadrillions, and you're totally fine with that. And at some point, that's going to be a problem. And if not for you, it's a problem for some people, and now they have an alternative to go and to use.
That's a big leap of faith, though, saying that the gold, to me, that's, if you think the United States and the UK are going to debase their currencies, there's other ways of expressing
they debase it every day.
Hey, well, they're desperate now
that is
because they're starting to see real problems. I mean, the bank, think about our bankers. The bankers, JP Morgan is seeing 1, 2, 5% of some of these accounts going into crypto. That's leaving his control. Same thing's happening in the US government. They're starting to feel that loss of control. And these are a bunch of, the people who are deciding what all these laws are, they're like the grandfathers of all the people who are doing all of this cool stuff. And so they're trying, it's like this huge double 2-generation gap between the guys trying to make these rules and the guys who are down here creating this new economy. And that new economy started for a reason. And in the US even, there's the unbanked people and they're all sort of stuck unbanked because all the regulators have made it so expensive to put together an account that you can't take an account for $10 anymore. But it's but these regulators, what they're missing is there's this whole millennium group, and that millennium group is deeply in debt, poorly educated. They've been stuck in this horrible situation. They've come out and they're going, okay, where's my job? And we're going, there's no job for you. You can't do anything. because you haven't been properly educated, and now you're deeply in debt. So now what? Well, they look and they go, well, that whole economy is not my economy. I'm going to this new economy where there's Bitcoin and all these people and they're trading.
I think we have established Tim has a clear ideological point of view on this, which is very persuasive to many people. Lou, you have the last word here in terms of...
Wait, don't you have this way of saying, no, don't we all agree?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, you'll all come around, you know.
Yeah.
Just like the 10,000 prediction.
I don't think we have. Do we have time for questions or not? Is there?
Well, let me just.
It's an unregulated, decentralized application here. You can go on as long as we.
But it's important. I just, you know, I'm not. No. You consider. I assume you consider yourself a libertarian. You certainly talk like a libertarian.
Freedom. Well, I want governments to have to compete and do a better job because they basically.
I think that's the definition of a libertarian. I think, and that's fine. And I don't,
I thought that was kind
one
of
of the great,
government.
but one of the great things about crypto at the moment is it's the very beginning. You know, and I mentioned, you know, that I spent a lot of time in 2013, and there was a much higher percentage of folks that had very strong political views then than there is now. It's still an element of what's going on, and personally, I think it's a great element of what's going on, right? The world needs to become a better place. We need to think of new ways to do things, and this isn't going to enable all these new things to go on. So I think it's an amazing element, but it's, you know, it is just one element of something I think that's even far as big as that is, it's far bigger.
Well, I would say my last comment is I'm a big believer in many of these ideas too. I would say it's going to be more successful if the participants embrace regulation. It will be better and more effective because trust is a key part, and most financial services are regulated for a very good reason. And
you want to put your money in a fund that's audited or not?
Yeah.
Yeah,
so anyway, I think that is all the time we have today. This was I want to thank our panel,
by the way,
is,
I think
and we all agree it's a great panel.
Thank you.